The Chatham Islands form an archipelago in the Pacific Ocean about 680 kilometres southeast of mainland New Zealand. It consists of about 10 islands within a 40-kilometre radius, the largest of which are Chatham Island and Pitt Island. The archipelago is called Rekohu in the indigenous language Moriori, and Wharekauri in Māori. It has officially been part of New Zealand since 1842, and includes the country's easternmost point, the 44s. Geography. The islands are at about 43 degree 53 euro squared s 176 degree 31 euro squared w, roughly 840 kilometres east of Christchurch, New Zealand. The nearest mainland New Zealand point to the Chatham Islands is Cape Turnagain, in the North Island at a distance of 650 kilometres. The nearest mainland New Zealand city to the islands is Hastings, New Zealand, located 697 kilometres to the northwest. The islands cover a total of 966 square kilometres, almost all of which is in the two main islands. The islands sit on the Chatham Rise, a large, relatively shallowly submerged part of the Zealandia continent that stretches east from near the South Island. The Chatham Islands, which emerged only within the last 4 million years, are the only part of the Chatham Rise showing above sea level. Chatham Island is the antipodes of the French department of Har copyright Raoult. The islands are generally hilly with the coasts a varied mixture including cliffs and sand dunes, beaches, and lagoons. Pitt is more rugged than Chatham, although the highest point is on a plateau near the southernmost point of the main island, which is dotted with numerous lakes and lagoons, notably the large Te Wanga Lagoon, as well as Hiro and Rangitahi. Chatham has a number of streams, including Te Awainanga and Taiku. The climate is cold, wet, and windy with average high temperatures between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius in July, the southern hemisphere winter. Chatham and Pitt are the only inhabited islands, with the remaining smaller islands being conservation reserves with access restricted or prohibited. The livelihoods of the inhabitants depend on agriculture, with the island being an exporter of cold water crayfish in particular, and increasing tourism. The names of the main islands, in the order of occupation are, climate, Chatham's time. The international date line lies to the east of the Chathams, even though the islands lie east of 180° longitude. The Chathams observe their own time, 45 minutes ahead of New Zealand time, including during periods of daylight saving. Their time zone is distinctive as one of very few which differ from others by a period other than a whole hour or half hour. Subdivision. The Chatham Islands are subdivided into 7 survey districts. Rangishi Survey District 43 degree 41 euro squared 50 euro cubed s 176 degree 37 euro squared 46 euro cubed w. Rekohu Survey District 43 degree 44 euro squared 11 euro cubed s 176 degree 20 euro squared 48 euro cubed w. Wharekauri Survey District 43 degree 48 euro squared 37 euro cubed s 176 degree 50 euro squared 00 euro cubed w. Te Wanga Survey District 43 degree 49 euro squared 26 euro cubed s 176 degree 32 euro squared 26 euro cubed w. Attribution Survey District 44 degree 01 euro squared 28 euro cubed s 176 degree 36 euro squared 53 euro cubed w. Ranger Mean Survey District 44 degree 02 euro squared 28 euro cubed s 176 degree 19 euro squared 58 euro cubed w. Rangiria Survey District 44 degree 16 euro squared 49 euro cubed s 176 degree 14 euro squared 58 euro cubed w. Ecology. The natural vegetation of the islands was a mixture of forest, scrubby heath, and swamp, but today most of the land is fern or pasture covered, although there are some areas of dense forest and areas of peat bogs and other habitats. Of interest are the macrocarpa trees, with branches trailing almost horizontally in the lee of the wind. The ferns in the forest understory include Blechnum discolor. The islands are home to a rich biodiversity including about 50 endemic plants adapted to the cold and the wind, of which Chatham Islands forget-me-not, Chatham Islands sow thistle, rautini, Chatham Islands kakaha, soft speargrass, and Chatham Island ekak or Chatham Island tree daisy are among the best known. The islands are a breeding ground for huge flocks of seabirds and a home to a number of endemic birds, some of them seabirds and some of them living on the islands themselves. The best-known species are the magenta petrel and the black robin, both of which came perilously close to extinction before drawing the attention of conservation efforts. Other endemic species are the Chatham oystercatcher, the Chatham gerygone, Chatham pigeon, Forbes parakeet, black swan, fairy prion, the Chatham snipe and the shore plover. The endemic Chatham shag, Pitt shag IUCN classification EN, and the Chatham albatross are at risk of capture in a variety of fishing gear, including fishing lines, trawls, gill nets, and pots. For accounts and notes on seabird species seen in the Chathams between 1960 and 1993 see IMBA 1994. A number of species have gone extinct since European settlement, including the 3 endemic species of rails, the Chatham raven, and the Chatham fanbird. Also, a number of endemic mammals are found in the waters of the Chathams, including New Zealand sea lions, leopard seals, and southern elephant seals. Much of the natural forest of these islands has been cleared for farming, but Mangere and Rangatira Islands are now preserved as nature reserves to conserve some of these unique flora and fauna. Another threat to wildlife comes from introduced species which prey on the indigenous birds and reptiles, whereas on Mangere and Rangatira, livestock has been removed and native wildlife is recovering. History. Moriori. The first human habitation of the Chathams was by migrating Polynesian tribes who settled the islands about 1500 CE, and in their isolation became the Moriori. The belief as to their origins was overturned late in the 20th century. The former belief, which arose in the 1800s, was that the original Moriori migrated directly from more northerly Polynesian islands, just as with the settlement of New Zealand by the ancestors of the Maori. However, linguistic research indicates instead that the ancestral Moriori were Maori wanderers from New Zealand. As Howe puts it, scholarship over the past 40 years has radically revised the model offered a century earlier by Smith. The Moriori as a pre-Polynesian people have gone. The plants cultivated by the Maori arrivals were ill-suited for the colder Chathams, so the Moriori lived as hunter-gatherers and fishermen. While their new environment deprived them of the resources with which to build ocean-going craft for long voyages, the Moriori invented what was known as the Wharekauri, a semi-submerged craft, constructed of flax and lined with their bladders from kelp. This craft was used to travel to the outer islands on birding missions. The Moriori society was a peaceful society and bloodshed was outlawed by the chief Nunaku after generations of warfare. Arguments were solved by consensus or by duels rather than warfare, but at the first sign of bloodshed, the fight was over. European arrival. The name Chatham Islands comes from the ship HMS Chatham of the Vancouver expedition, whose captain William R. Broughton landed on November 29, 1791, claimed possession for Great Britain and named the islands after the First Lord of the Admiralty, John Pitt, 2nd Earl of Chatham. A relative of his, Thomas Pitt, was a member of the Vancouver expedition. Sealers and whalers soon started hunting in the surrounding ocean with the islands as their base. It is estimated that 10 to 20% of the indigenous Moriori soon died from diseases introduced by foreigners. The sealing and whaling industries ceased activities about 1861, while fishing remained as a major economic activity. Chatham Islands date their anniversary on November 29, and observe it November 30. Maori conquest and genocide. On November 19, 1835 and later in December 5. About 900 Maori armed with guns, clubs and axes arrived on the brig Lord Rodney. The first mate of the ship had been kidnapped and threatened with death unless the captain took the invaders on board. The Maori included men, women and children, along with 78 ton of seed potato, 20 pigs and 7 waka. The Maori came from 2 tribes, Ngati Tama and Ngati Mutunga. Initially they were cared for by the local Moriori. When it became clear they intended to stay, the Moriori withdrew to their marae at Te Wapatiki. The Moriori debated what to do about the Taranaki Māori invaders. They decided to implement their policy of non-aggression. After this the invaders began to takohi, or walk the land, to lay claim to it. They proceeded to ritually massacre about 300 Moriori, who were thought to have totaled about 2,000, cannibalize the dead and enslave the survivors. A Moriori survivor recalled, "The Maori commenced to kill us like sheep, we were terrified, fled to the bush, concealed ourselves in holes underground, and in any place to escape our enemies. It was of no avail. We were discovered and killed men, women and children indiscriminately." A Maori conqueror justified their actions as follows, "We took possession in accordance with our custom and we caught all the people. Not one escaped. Some ran away from us, these we killed, and others we killed, but what of that? It was in accordance with our custom." Ernst D. Fenbach, who visited the Chathams on a New Zealand Company ship in 1840, reported that the Moriori were the virtual slaves of Maori and were severely mistreated, with death a blessing. By the time the slaves were released in 1862 only 160 remained, 10% of the 1835 population. After the invasion, Moriori were forbidden to marry Moriori, or to have children with each other. All became slaves of the invaders until the 1860s. Many died in despair. Many Moriori women had children by their Maori masters. A number of Moriori women eventually married either Maori or European men. Some were taken from the Chathams and never returned. In 1814 Ngati Mutunga decided to attack Ngati Tama at their pa. They built a high staging next to the pass so they could fire down on their former allies. Fighting was still in progress when the New Zealand Company ship Cuba arrived with the idea of buying land for settlement. The Treaty of Waitangi, at that stage, did not apply to the islands. The company negotiated a truce between the two warring tribes. In 1841 the New Zealand Company had proposed to establish a German colony on the Chathams. The proposal was discussed by the directors and John Ward signed an agreement with Karl Sieveking of Hamburg on September 12, 1841. However, when the Colonial Office said that the islands were to be part of the colony of New Zealand and any German settling there would be treated as aliens, Joseph Sums claimed that Ward had been acting on his own initiative. The proposed leader John Bate in the expedition went to Nelson instead. The company was then able to purchase large areas of land at Whangaroa and Waitangi from Ngati Mutunga and also large areas of land from Ngati Tama. This did not stop Ngati Mutunga from trying to get revenge for the death of one of their chiefs. They were satisfied after they killed the brother of Ngati Tama chief. The tribes agreed to an uneasy peace which was finally conformed in 1842. An all-male group of German Lutheran missionaries arrived in 1843. After a group of women was sent out to join them 3 years later, several marriages ensued, and many members of the present-day population can trace their ancestry back to the missionary families. In 1865 the Maori leader Te Kuti was exiled on the Chatham Islands along with a large group of Maori rebels called Hau, who had murdered missionaries and fought against government forces, mainly on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. The rebel prisoners were paid 1 shilling a day to work on sheep farms owned by the few European settlers. Sometimes they worked on road and track improvements. They were initially guarded by 26 guards, half of whom were Maori. They lived and were along with their families. The prisoners helped build a redoubt of stone surrounded by a ditch and wall. Later they built 3 stone prison cells. Present-day conditions. The Moriori community is organized as the Hokochari Moriori Trust. The Moriori have received recognition from the Crown and the New Zealand government, and some of their claims against those institutions for the generations of neglect and oppression have been accepted and acted on. Moriori are recognized as the original people of Rekohu. The Crown also recognized the Maori tribe, Ngati Mutunga, as having indigenous status in the Chathams by right of 160-odd years of occupation. The population of the islands is 650, including members of both ethnic groups. In January 2005 the Moriori celebrated the opening of the new Kupinga Marae. Modern descendants of the 1835 Maori conquerors claimed to share an ancestral Maori fishing rights. This claim was granted. Now that the primordial population, the Moriori, have been recognized to be former Maori over the objections of some of the Ngati Mutunga they too share in the ancestral Maori fishing rights. Both groups have been granted fishing quotas. Population. Chatham and Pitt Islands are inhabited, with 600 residents in the 2013 census. The town of Waitangi is the main settlement with some 200 residents. There are other villages such as Oinga, Te1 and Kaingaroa, where there are 2 primary schools. A third school is on Pitt Island. There are also the fishing villages of Oinga and Port Hart. The population is mainly of European, Maori and Moriori background. 59% said they identified as Maori, and around 77% identified as European or New Zealander. Waitangi facilities include a hospital with resident doctor, bank, several stores, and engineering and marine services. The main shipping wharf is located here. Transport. Visitors to the Chathams usually arrive by air from Auckland, Christchurch or Wellington to the airport on Chatham Island. While freight generally arrives by ship, the sea journey takes too long for many passengers, and is not always available. The Chathams are part of New Zealand, so there are no border controls or formalities on arrival, but visitors are advised to have pre-arranged their accommodation on the islands. Transport operators may refuse to carry passengers without accommodation bookings. There is no scheduled public transport, but accommodation providers are normally able to arrange transport. Tasman Empire Airways Limited initially serviced the Chathams by air using flying boats. With the withdrawal of Teal, the RNZAF maintained an infrequent service with short Sunderland flying boats. NZ4111 was damaged on takeoff from Te Wanga Lagoon on November 4, 1959 and remains as a wreck on the island. The last flight by RNZAF flying boats was on March 22, 1967. For many years Bristol freighter aircraft served the islands, a slow and noisy freight aircraft converted for carrying passengers by installing a removable passenger compartment equipped with airline seats and a toilet in part of the cargo hold. The air service primarily served to ship out high-value export crayfish products. The grass landing field at Hapupu, at the northern end of the island, proved a limiting factor, as few aircraft apart from the Bristol freighter have both arranged to fly to the islands and the ruggedness to land on the grass airstrip. Although other aircraft did use the landing field occasionally, they would often require repairs to fix damage resulting from the rough landing. Hapupu is also the site of the J. M. Barker National Historic Reserve, where there are Maori Rekohu. In 1981, after many years of requests by locals and the imminent demise of the aging Bristol freighters, the construction of a sealed runway at Kawa, Tuta Airport, allowed more modern aircraft to land safely. The Chatham Zone airline, Air Chathams, now operates services to Auckland on Thursdays, Wellington on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, and Christchurch on Tuesdays. The timetable varies seasonally, but generally planes depart the Chathams around 10:30 am and arrive in the mainland around noon. There they refuel and reload, and depart again at around 1 p.m. back to the Chathams. Air Chathams operates twin-turboprop Convair 580 aircraft in combi configurations and Fairchild Metroliners. Black Robin Freighters operates shipping services from Timaru. There is a small section of tar-sealed road between Waitangi and Te1, but the majority of the island's roads are gravel. Government. Electorates. Until the 1980s, the Chathams were in the Lyttelton electorate, but since then they have formed part of the Rongotai General Electorate, which mostly lies in Wellington. Annette King is the MP for Rongotai. The Te Tai Tonga Maori seat includes the Chatham Islands. Local government on the islands, uniquely within New Zealand, involves a council established by its own Act of Parliament, the Chatham Islands Council Act 1995. The Chatham Islands Council operates as a district council with regional council functions, making it in effect a unitary authority but with not quite as many responsibilities as the others. Some regional council functions are being administered by Environment Canterbury, the Canterbury Regional Council. In the 2010 local government elections, Chatham Islands had NZ's highest rate of returned votes, with 71.3% voting. State services, policing is carried out by a sole charge constable appointed by the Wellington Police District, who has often doubled as an official for many government departments, including court registrar, customs officer and immigration officer. A district court judge sent from either the North Island or the South Island presides over court sittings, but urgent sittings may take place at the Wellington District Court. Because of the isolation and small population, some of the rules governing daily activities undergo a certain relaxation. For example, every transport service operated solely on Great Barrier Island, the Chatham Islands or Stewart Island Rekohu need not comply with Section 70C of the Transport Act 1962. Drivers subject to Section 70B must nevertheless keep record of their driving hours in some form. Health. The partially elected Hawke's Bay District Health Board provides the islands with health services. Education. 3 schools are located on the Chathams, at Kaingaroa, Te1, and Pitt Island. Pitt Island and Kaingaroa are staffed by sole charge principals, while Te1 has 3 teachers and a principal. These schools cater for children from Year 1 to 8. No secondary school is present on the Chathams. The majority of secondary school-aged students leave the island for boarding schools in mainland New Zealand. A small number remain on the island and carry out their secondary education through correspondence. Economy. Most of the Chatham Island economy is based on fishing and crayfishing, with only a fragment of adventure tourism. This economic mix has been stable for the past 50 years, as little infrastructure or population is present to engage in higher levels of industrial or telecommunications activity. Air Chathams has its head office in Te1. Electricity generation. At present, 2 200-kilowatt wind turbines provide most of the power on the island, while diesel generators provide the rest. In popular culture, fiction, in Jules Verne's Robber the Conqueror, Robber anchors his flying vessel Albatross over the Chathams after the horizontal propellers are damaged in a storm. The novel Cloud Atlas and its 2012 film adaptation includes the diary of a fictitious 19th-century American traveler who passes through the Chathams. In Joe Buff's futuristic nuclear submarine warfare book Crush Depth, Chatham Island is destroyed by an Axis-planted atomic bomb. Television. The TVNZ series How the Other Half Lives had a segment on the Chatham Islands. Country calendar TVNZ program, Hunting Aotearoa Māori Channel, What Now Children's Television. Residents of the Chatham Islands were the subject of an episode of TVNZ's This Town on November 9, 2013. See also: Chatham Islands penguin, Flora of the Chatham Islands, History of Chatham Islands numismatics, List of islands. References. Bibliography, Clark, Ross 1994. Moriori and Māori, The Linguistic Evidence. In Sutton, Douglas G., ed., The Origins of the First New Zealanders. Auckland, Auckland University Press. Davis, Denise and Solomon, Massachusetts E. 2006. Moriori. In Ter and Euro The Encyclopedia of New Zealand, updated June 9, 2006. Diamond, Judd. Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies. New York, W. W. Norton. PA 53 Howe, Carrier 2006. Ideas of Māori Origins. In Ter and Euro The Encyclopedia of New Zealand, updated June 9, 2006. King, Michael. Moriori, A People Rediscovered. Viking. ISBN A0-14-010391-0. McFadden, B.G. Archaeology and Holocene Sand Dune Stratigraphy on Chatham Island. Journal of the Royal Society of New Zealand 24, 17 Euro 44 doi, 10.1080/03014223.1994.9517454 Harper, Paul. Voter turnout up in local elections. The New Zealand Herald. Retrieved October 16, 2010. Waitangi Tribunal. 2001. Rekohu, a report on Moriori and Ngati Mutunga claims in the Chatham Islands. Report number 64. Further reading, New Zealand. Chatham Islands, Heritage and Conservation. Christchurch, NZ, Canterbury University Press in association with the Department of Conservation. ISBN A978-1-877257-78-0. External links, Chatham Islands Council, Wharekauri Moriori Trust, 1998 information, photographs from the Christchurch Public Library, Department of Conservation information, unofficial flag, Massey University study of Chatham's ecology, information and pictures of Chatham Islands. The sisters are also mentioned, Pitt Island Education Resources. Rekohu, the Chatham Islands Education Resources.